Hello and welcome to In No Particular Order. I'm Matt, and today I'm joined by Michael, David, and Tyson. Except there's no David, it's Nick.
Hey,
Nice save, very smooth.
my name's David.
Yeah, so today we will be talking about something that's been in the media for a couple weeks now, really. Crunch in video games. I'm not sure why it's been such a high topic in the media, but that is our first question. Why do you think?
Oh boy. Um,
That's a monolith of a question.
yeah.
I have an
That's-
answer.
All right.
Let's hear it.
Um,
Money.
no, I think what happens is, there's been a lot of big games recently that have failed miserably. Like, come out with tons of bugs and everyone hates them, and there's a bunch of issues, and they're unfinished. And then a lot of journalists go in and interview people who are involved in the project. And what you find out is that there was a lot of crunch involved. And I think every video game project, no, not everyone, but most video game projects, just the nature of the beast is you're eventually going to get some crunch. And I think that when games turn out badly, that's one of the first things that you point out and say, see, they overworked their developers. Especially when it's like a big team and you can't really blame any one person, so you blame kind of the upper management. Um, so I think it's more of just like the fact that these giant games have come out with issues, there's kind of a microscope on them. And when you put that microscope on, you realize, oh yeah, one of the reasons these games failed is because they overworked their people.
I think
And
there's
I bet there's tons of huge games that have done really well that also had crunch, but because they did so well, people weren't really talking about that.
I would actually say on the contrary, particularly now, like I agree with what you said, like it is definitely because there's a lot of large names that are um have made faulty products and there's a microscope on them. But then tangentially, we've now moved from being mad at the games that failed because of crunch to also examining the companies who didn't fail because of crunch, such as Red Dead, right?
Yeah.
In recent news, recent-ish, right? Last few months or however since its release,
It's about a year.
about a year, last year or so. You can tell where my head's at. Last year or so, they've been under the microscope for pushing their team very, very hard in ways that I believe a large portion of the public, both the consumer and those with more of a professional opinion on the matter, both agree that is inappropriate. So I think the reason it's such a big topic of conversation was started for the reasons you suggested, and it's continued because now people are starting to examine it everywhere, both in successes and failures.
Yeah, fair
Mhm.
enough.
So yeah, I think maybe failures brought it up, but everyone's doing it.
Yeah, so
And so
I
Exactly.
think it's part. I think it's it's pretty much common knowledge. If it wasn't before, it is now that it's pretty much part of the DNA, so to speak, of the game dev industry. That it's in there. It's kind of like part of the culture. It's part of the mentality. Whether that's right or not, that's what the discussion's about. But I do think it's been there for basically everyone. But yeah, it's exactly what you're saying is because now people are really looking into it, that now people are finding out more. So it's been there for 10 years, but no one's written about it, no one's heard about it, so nothing happens.
at least not in a hugely discussed way.
And
I'm
I
sure
think
there's
then
I'm sure there was articles about it back in the day too, but I think more people are talking about it now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think another reason too is because of the growing trend in the consumer side of the games industry, sort of I use the word villainize lightly, but to villainize developers or their publishers or a combination of both. more so in recent memory than any time before. Previously, 10 years ago, if a game came out and it was bad, which there were many that came out and are bad, you probably don't remember them because they were bad, right?
Fair enough.
They come out and people are like, "Wow, this game's bad." And they don't buy it, or they tell their friends not to buy it, or they return it to their local GameStop, and whatever, and you move on. But nowadays, with games as a service and things that are a lot more, when implemented poorly, that are a lot more anti-consumer. I think consumers are probably like getting the fangs out a little bit and being like, "All right, we're on to you," and that's sort of just tilled this field of complaint and what was the word you used there, Michael? Under the microscope, to put business practices in the games industry under a microscope. So I think it's a combination of all of these things, a little from column A, a little from column B.
It's also the fact that the industry as a whole has grown a lot recently.
Yeah.
You've got you developers that started off with 5-10 people. Now they've got 100, right? So
that's true. That's true.
It's a lot more likely to hear, bad experiences from developers when there's more developers in the industry to talk about it, right? So
that's also true.
Games are harder to make in order to meet the demand as far as AAA goes. And on top of that, they're not just harder to make, but the style of game that I think was big. I think it's slowing down a bit, but the style of game that was really big the last 10 years is the open world game, which requires tons of content. And in order to manage all that, it's just mind blowing.
Yeah, I mean, look at some of the companies that are hailed for their large open world projects, because they came out well. We're looking at your Witcher 3s and stuff like that. Those are games, many of them, that took an incredibly long time to make, right? Which is, I think maybe is a little concerning why you get a game that's, The Witcher has a lot of depth, but at face value, it's a large open world, so people can easily compare that to other large open worlds. I'm aware that there's very, very large difference between it and most of its competition, but because they can easily compare that, they go, well, why did The Witcher take 8 years to make or something? Don't quote me on that.
But that's true.
The next Far Cry comes out every year.
It's true. It's like some people will disregard all the extra bits, and they'll say, you're an open world, you're the same. Yeah. It's that's the difference when you get into when the consumer is a little more vocal, then you really understand how I don't want to say ignorant in a bad way, but you know what I mean, how they don't know what goes into it.
Well, what they notice is they notice the product, right? They notice the end product. It's kind of like it's an old saying with animation. A really good animation, you will have absolutely no idea it's there, right? Yes. You should notice it because it's good. So if you're playing The Witcher, you should just feel immersed. Maybe the average player, who isn't looking for the nitty gritty, they'll feel just as immersed as they will playing Far Cry, right? Because it's a big open world full of stuff to do. But anyway, that's sort of diverging a little bit off the topic at hand.
Yeah. Well, I think those are good reasons, though. So kind of going off of this is the big opinion question, $1 million opinion question. What do you think of crunch time? Do you support it? Should it exist? Thoughts on that?
Anyone want to go first?
I can go. I value personal time. So it's nice now I've never worked as a game dev full time other than when I was in school. So I don't really count that because we were learning. So we were kind of forced into crunches sometimes, but we could talk about that. But as far as just trying to get things done in a reasonable amount of time, I try to do that the best I can and avoid crunches. So I don't want to do crunches, but there's some times where you're just like, I just kind of want to get this done quickly, and so you just force yourself to work longer than you should,
Yeah.
and it's kind of not healthy, but it's worth it in a way because now you're done it and it's not on your mind anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a love-hate relationship with it where it's like it feels good to do it sometimes, but then I also realize it's probably not smart. I should have planned better. So sometimes it's self-inflicted,
Fair enough.
especially for us who are not working under some big company. It can be self-inflicted a lot, and sometimes
Nick
you're okay with that, and sometimes you're not.
Okay.
Yeah. For me, I view crunch as the embodiment of poor planning. Um, if you're forced into crunch time, so to answer the latter two questions, do I support it? No. Should it exist? Probably not. Do I think it's valid? Like, when faced with a situation where you have to do it, is it a valid strategy? Well, that's up to the personal lives of the people who are interacting with it.
Is it worth it to them, basically?
Is it worth it to them? But in terms of what do I think of it, like I said, I view it entirely as a lack of planning. I think if you are capable of planning something properly, allotting the correct amount of time, and I think that in indie studios, this is sounds bad, but it's a little more forgivable because you're not well versed in it. You're learning, right? You're learning with either friends or colleagues or other people, other students or other people you're working on a mod team, whatever it is. When you're not experienced, you don't know how long stuff's going to take. We're a little guilty of that in a sense that there's a lot of stuff where we've crunched stuff out or pushed deadlines because we're still learning. Like I would say, I will venture this guess out there that we're a little bit better than we were as students.
Oh, I'm sure we are.
At knowing our limit and staying within it. But when you're a AAA studio and you've got some of the best managerial and project management talent on staff with some of the best developers and artists, designers, the whole nine yards, all the people in the background there doing the logistics as well. You've got some of the best people in the industry in some of these large studios. When they give you a quote that says, it'll take us this long to do this thing, to achieve this task to the level of quality you're expecting. I think that your job as a manager is to either say one of two things. Okay, then we'll push the deadline because it's not going to be done in time, or don't do it to this quality bar, do it to a lower quality bar and get it done on time.
Right.
It's like, it's to me, crunch is, well, we need it done now, so just do it. And that is not planning. That is fucking stupid.
Yeah.
It's like you should have the foresight to develop your plan, in accordance with the team that you have, not just get a bunch of people together and go, well, get it done. You're not going to produce good stuff. You're going to get Anthem. So
fair.
anyway,
Yeah, that's true.
That's what I think of. That's what I think of it.
Yeah, you would expect an accurate representation of the amount of work. An accurate amount of time allotted to the amount of work, especially if they're the best, right? Is what you're saying.
Yeah, well, and I'm just saying, more than you'd expect the right allotment, I would say that these people know how long it will take them, and they'll say it'll take us a month. An art lead will say it'll take our art team a month to do this, and the production staff will say, well, we need it done in a week.
Yeah.
So the art team says, okay, well, we'll do it at a lower quality in order to achieve that without killing all of our staff. And I think that we'll probably touch on it as we go, but there's this sort of stigma against wanting to not do crunch. Is that a double negative?
I think I know what
There's
you
a
mean, though.
there's a stigma to saying no. I'd like to go home and spend time with my family. Like
Yes.
there's a weird thing with that, so people are afraid, justifiably, to not or to stand up against that type of thing.
Mhm.
Anyways,
I think an element of that of saying, of like the fear of saying I want to leave this job right and go home, is that being a game dev, I think you get this feeling like I'm doing something really special. I'm doing something that's my passion. Not many people get to do this awesome job, so I want to work longer and harder,
Mm-hmm.
and that's an element of it.
So
yeah,
go ahead, Nick.
and further to that is that if you do say, and there's a lot of situations like this, and I personally know people as well who've been addressed with this situation, where you go to a place and they say do this thing, and you say, well, that's in so many words. They say, no, it's inappropriate to ask me to do that in that amount of time. They go, okay, get out. We'll find someone who will, because
Mhm.
there is
Yeah.
someone out there who is desperate enough to do it, to work
Mhm.
80 hours a week or 90 or more, right? There's someone out there desperate enough to do that, to be part of the industry, that they will replace you easily.
Yeah.
So it's depressing a little bit that way.
So everything you guys are saying is yeah, it's very good points, and it's very accurate based on the articles I've been reading, as they've been coming out over the past few weeks. So just to do a little sidestep from the question is that so a couple of articles I've been reading. Apparently, it's been shown that when budgeting time and money on a game project, crunch time is already factored into that timeline. So, Nick, it's interesting that you went straight for it's the embodiment of poor planning, because they are planning it in their timeline. It's already in there before the game even starts production.
Which is precisely why I said it's bad planning. Why are you planning to slam your people at the very end of your project?
Yes,
That's not good planning.
but I think it's interesting. It's a distinction between oh, we didn't plan it right. Here's crunch time. Surprise, surprise. In this case, it seems to be more. We know this won't be done. We
Here,
know crunch time is coming.
let me rephrase my
You
statement.
know?
It is the difference between planning, which is planning crunch time, and good planning, which is not planning crunch time.
Fair enough. But that was
That's what I was getting at.
but that's a scary. That's a scary realization. Whoever's planning these big projects are going, okay, we need this much time. It's not going to happen, so people will be screwed in the end. Let's do it, guys. Like they're not adjusting anything for it. They're just going, yes, this seems accurate to me.
Let me quote someone for you. I work best when I'm under pressure.
That's
Andrew
Smith, our program.
Now,
Some people like that honestly will assume that they're going to get a bunch of it done last minute.
yes.
But I don't think a company should do that.
But see, I think it's the difference. I don't think it's not pressure. Yes, if
Yeah.
the company went, hey, just get it done whenever you want. Obviously, there's a good chance that the project won't get done on time. But if there's enough pressure, just like, hey, milestone's coming up, just can we get this done, and it's properly planned, like Nick is saying, then there's still that pressure, but you're not dying inside.
And I guess the main thing for me is when you're looking at that scenario, right? And there are people who work well under pressure and who will do stuff last minute, but the difference is that you don't plan for crunch time when the game needs to ship. You plan for crunch time when the game needs to be done. I mean, you shouldn't plan for crunch time, but if you develop a plan to make a game over a year, plan to have the game done in 8 months.
Yes.
That's called a buffer. All the people who like to work under pressure because they're sadists for some reason.
Look, sadists are the best programmers.
That's true. Yeah. What's it?
But yeah, those people will.
Silicon Valley taught me that. Those people will be. Ooh, there's fire under my butt. I'm gonna get stuff done. They'll do that. 8 months. And then there's 4 more months to go. This game really didn't turn out the way we want it to. Now we have 4 months to polish it and fix
Right.
it. as opposed to this game needs to ship in a week. Put it out on EA early access and call it a beta.
Yeah,
You
for
know,
sure.
or something like that. So
Um,
there's planning for redundancies. Makes me mad. Buffer time is so important.
There was also another stat from another article that I read a while back was that a 2017 survey by the IGDA, which is the International Game Developers Association, found that 53% of employees said crunch was expected at their workplace. So this goes back to, I think, what Nick was saying before, was that these people are so there's a lot of people who are so desperate to do the job, to join the industry, that it's become just an expectation of the job.
Which is wrong.
Yeah. Like I get that sometimes, okay, we had a bad week. Let's just knock out these two features. You have to stay a couple hours, but it's at random times, but this is expected as part of the job description. I don't know if it's in the description, but it basically is that if you don't stay, you lose your job.
And that's why there's such a big push to have unionization for video game workers.
And yes,
is so that stuff like this can't happen. Where if somebody, like if your manager walks up to you and says, "Hey, I need you to work this weekend because we need to get this feature done," and then you've got family plans. You want to spend time with the wife and kids, or you got to go to a wedding or something, or something you have planned that you can't miss out on. If you say no, there's really nothing stopping them from firing you.
Especially since, like we've said before, there's a million other people who will take your spot like that.
Exactly.
And just to clear up a little loophole here, because it's something that I've looked into to make sure what I'm allowed to tell you guys to do or not. I'm kidding. Is the reason they can do that, because a lot of people might be thinking, well, they can't do that. Like there's labor laws and stuff. You're right. There's labor laws. Means they can't fire you without unjust cause. Except they write in your contract that you are expected to be available to work overtime Monday through Sunday at any point with no notice whatsoever, and that is a mandatory requirement of your position. So when you say, no, I can't, and people go, wait, they can't fire you for not wanting to do that? Yeah, they can, because you technically breached the contract you wrote when you
signed the contract. Ugh. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. They got you there, right? So.
Yep, they develop their own loophole, which a unionization, like Tyson was talking about, would solve. It would force a company to not be allowed to include certain things in their contract.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's
The interesting thing that I have with this is that I can kind of understand both sides of the coin, where I can understand the point of view of the developer, where it's like, I mean, it's a job. It's not my whole life. Granted, it's a job I love doing and it's a passion, but it's a job. I should be, treated fairly and have certain rights in that position. But I can also understand the point of view of a publisher, where they may invest, hundreds of millions of dollars into a development of this project, and they are trying their hardest to get that money back, right? Mm-hmm. It's an investment, just like any other business opportunity. That's capitalism at its finest.
Where's our game?
Well, I think
you put money in and you expect to get money back out. That's just how the system works.
It's true.
See that pile of money? That's my money.
That's Tyson. That's very true. Yes, a lot of these companies are public companies, so they're being traded, and there's a lot of shareholders, putting pressure on it, which is why crunch time is such a big thing, because all these shareholders are going, hey, deadline, get it done, and then they have to get it done. Makes sense. However, now this is a big change that would have to happen, but the reason why these shareholders are putting so much pressure on these deadlines and the crunch exists, part of the reason I think is because they're just because the poor planning. Once again, it's they're planning for crunch, so they're saying, hey, this won't be done in 4 years unless we do all this crunch. Well, if you actually go up to the shareholders and say, hey, this will actually be done in this much time, well, there you go. Like you've planned properly. The shareholders are expecting the date that you gave them without crunch. So if you get it done earlier, then you have even more time to polish and do everything. But if you say, hey, it'll be done in 3 years, but it won't, well, of course there's going to be crunch.
There can also be the other end of the coin where the publishers want it done by a certain date to compete with other products.
That's true. But again, like, obviously, yes, I know this is business and it's a big thing, but this would have to be a dramatic change that then the company would have to say, well, fair enough, but then either do you want lower quality or push it back?
Yeah, and this comes down to the issue of escalation, right? Where it's the reason that problem that Tyson just mentioned is a problem is because one company will say, well, you know what? We're not going to destroy our staff. We're going to be good people. We're going to give them the time they need. We're going to plan accordingly. We're going to be basically God sent. We'll be great. Then they get trounced in the market because all the other people push their employees and developers like slaves, and they get a product out.
Mm-hmm.
And if it bombs, well, they would have failed anyways, in theory, in their eyes. And if it doesn't, well, then that's just, it's like Russian roulette, but with 3-year development cycles.
Yeah. It's also
right.
The thing.
So
it's also the thing. Hey, you'll do it for 20. Michael will do it for 10. I'll go with Michael. Like it's that sort of thing. But
yeah, from an investment standpoint,
mm-hmm.
You're right.
But you understand what I'm saying is that like it's a complete, and I don't even know if this will ever happen, ever. But it's
lawful
a complete
removal of crunch.
It's a complete revert or a change of mentality, of culture for the entire industry, for the planning, for the company to say no, this is the realistic way to do it, just all of it.
It's not even the whole industry that you have to fight. It's the whole of what America's society is built on.
Well, Western society, not just America.
Now there are companies. There are companies. It's true who have been doing this. In different industries. So it is slowly coming into play. But yeah, you're right. Like I would say at least 95% of business mentality here is. This.
Unfortunately, it needs to be one of those things where everybody changes at once, right? Mm-hmm. Because then what the difference would be was, if you have, like, I'm thinking for some reason off the top of my head of the classic shooter duel between Call of Duty and Battlefield.
Okay.
Right? They always come out around the same time, competing with each other. Instead of getting, in a scenario where only one of those parties chooses to remove crunch and expand their timelines, they will be falling behind the other one. But if both are forced to expand, then the difference would be, instead of getting a new Call of Duty and Battlefield every year, you get a new one every 2 years because they were forced to push. They'll release at the same time as each other anyways.
Yeah. No,
but the difference is there's a legal barrier in there keeping them stuck.
And then, of course, since there's no union, they can't go on strike or anything. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, that all of the employees, everyone who's sick of crunch, and let's just say it's all the quote unquote grunts, so to speak, and they all just walk out until the companies pledge to have no crunch, all of them. Well, there's 1 million college students who are just gonna swoop right in, who just graduated.
Or we'll outsource our development to Singapore.
Or that,
the animation industry, a lot of animation is done in Asia.
That's true. True.
Because animators here got overworked and basically started saying, no, we won't do it for this union. Cheap.
Yeah.
And I don't know about that, but I do know that a lot of animated shows and VFX and whatnot is done overseas.
Yeah, so even if the people rose up and like there was a massive wave of this across the world, it wouldn't do anything.
Corporations are going to corporation,
basically all those people
is going to globalism.
Yeah, all those people would lose their jobs, and then there'd just be new people back in the meat grinder, so to speak. So it'd be like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
So that's why.
Sorry, Mike,
sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say that's why we're not currently working for a big studio or anything, and we're just making games because we like making games for art.
Yeah.
purposes.
So then on the other side,
if we make some money along the way, that's awesome. But
yeah,
we're not going to kill ourselves.
but then on the other side of the coin is what we talked
Please.
about a couple podcasts back was, the rise of indies. What if, because I believe, I'm pretty sure from the guys that we know anyway, the indies have been trying to avoid that mentality and that culture, right? So let's just say the indies took over, the game industry, and AAA's became less and less. That could be a way that crunch gets reduced or removed. But the chances of that, I don't know.
Even in that scenario, I mean, to play the pessimistic devil's advocate in this situation, those people would just start doing crunch because now they're in the big game and they have to compete with the big fish. So they will do the big fish tactics and make the little fish cry. So it's almost, it's always a bigger fish. Yeah, I think it's like, there's a certain size at which these awful practices just become norm.
Yeah.
And I think there's a size at which, prior to that, where it's more informed. And I think what I would like to see, as a possible solution, honestly, is just help funding those smaller ventures while they're small, because the more great products that are available for less by smaller teams, that have these good practices and stuff like that, these quality products, the more of those that exist, the more there is a chance that the consumer base will notice them. Because despite the fact that indie games are risingly popular now compared to how they were a few years ago, and I'm sure they'll be more popular as time goes on, the AA, what used to be a joke of the AA industry, is actually an industry now. So they're getting more and more, but they are still very small compared to AAA.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. All this to say is it would need a crazy dramatic change, and I don't know if that's even possible.
This is where there's a double-edged sword on the consumer end, because this is the blessing and the curse of capitalism, is that the market can be controlled by the consumers if the consumers could all band together, right? But that's never going to happen because people can't band together like that on large scales, as far as I can tell.
Nope.
But it's a pretty straightforward thing. If there's a game that comes out and there's all this news about these guys were working like 120-hour weeks for like 5 months to get the game out, the easiest way to stop that from happening is to not buy the game.
Yeah.
That sends a pretty direct message to the publishers that, hey, this is an atmosphere that we don't want to support.
It's true.
But if you don't buy the game, the publisher doesn't make any money, which means the developer doesn't make any money. And then, developers get fired. So it's a messy environment to be in, really.
Here, I got a good word for it. It's called cesspool. You need to cleanse the whole thing. Root and stem.
If we don't clear out all the chakras, we'll never be able to enter the avatar state.
No, what we need to do is just we starve them of money. They'll close all the developers, and then there'll be no developers to make the publishers money, and all the publishers will close, and then we will rise anew.
Like a phoenix.
Like a phoenix.
Universe.
With a grateful universe.
Oh my god. All right, so we have a few questions from Discord, and these are mainly directed at us, SkyPyre itself. So from Discord, we have, if SkyPyre is guilty of crunch, I think that's supposed to be is SkyPyre guilty of crunch?
Cannot confirm or deny that. Tyson, you choose your next words nicely.
I haven't done a whole lot of game development for the company, but I have done a fair amount of video production. And I can definitely say that I have done some crunch, but it has been entirely self-inflicted because I have the discipline of a, drugged up squirrel.
That's
where
cool.
it's like, yeah, I could work on this, but there's other stuff that I could do that's not productive at all. So I'm just gonna do that.
Yeah.
And then the time comes when it's like, hey, I have no idea how to make a video, and the video's due tomorrow. And then I wind up staying up all night finishing off the video, and most of the time I get it done. But I usually regret it afterwards. Like that day, I'm just exhausted at work, and then I'm like, oh, never again. And then the cycle begins anew.
And then you're like, why didn't I work on this 3 weeks ago like I said I would?
Yeah. And then, the next video comes out, and the cycle begins anew, where I put it off to the last minute because I'm a horrible, horrible person. So, like, at least for me, there's definitely crunch time involved for me, but it's entirely my own fault because I am a bad person.
Okay. So in terms of game dev for SkyPyre, I wouldn't say there's been crunch in the way that the industry has been doing it. But we have had moments of peak performance, peak productivity.
Stress.
Stress, I guess, yes, but productivity. So based on, we work a couple hours here and there when we can, but we also have lives, right? So we work our day jobs, and then we do SkyPyre stuff, but we also take nights off and have lives. However, last year I do recall when we were working on Blobs, we went to an event, and then we were like, okay, you know what, guys? In a month, let's just finish all the maps. Let's just have them all done. And then we did. We were super productive. We set ourselves a milestone, and we were super productive and got it done. Now, I guess comparatively to how we'd been working before, yes, we put in a lot more time, a lot more effort. So technically, I guess it's crunch, but it wasn't to the point where we were working outrageous hours and we were just, going crazy. But it was a lot more than we had been before. So yes and no, I guess.
I would say, generally speaking, we avoid crunch because as the studio manager, I try to make sure that we don't experience crunch. And in scenarios, like I mentioned earlier, where we realize the time we thought we would take isn't what we can complete because we're still learning our limits, we extend deadlines. When possible. If it's a project for a client or something like that, you make sure you get it done, and usually there's a lot more vigilance to finish projects of that nature. But for our own stuff, like our original projects like Blobs, even when we were in university, I tried with Halen to do my best to avoid it, but that's a little different because there we had a publisher and its name was Carlton.
Yeah.
I'd say we definitely try to avoid crunch to the best of our ability. But toward the end of Blobs there were a few weeks where people were putting in hours when they otherwise very much would not be. It's not like there were weeks like some of these poor souls in the industry who do this full time and they're working 120-hour weeks or something like that. Tyson, you mentioned that earlier. But they were definitely more than we were used to when you consider we spend 40 hours at a day job, and then you spend another 15 hours in that week. That's quite a large chunk more than you're expecting. So I would say we try to avoid it, but we are definitely guilty of it. But not guilty of it in a malicious sense. Guilty of it in a sense that we're still learning our limits. I'm confident that at some point in the future, let me rephrase that. I'm confident that if we took on the same scale of project, if we decided to make another game like Blobs, we would not experience crunch at all because we know how long it takes to make that.
Yeah. Yeah,
an individual person might pull a Tyson and then fuck up for 2 weeks and then have to slam it out at the very end. But as a team and as a studio, we would not experience crunch because I am the best fucking planner on earth.
Well,
Can confirm.
Yeah, that's actually very true. I've seen your calendar. It's a work of God.
Van
Is that
Gogh
an
is
extra?
jealous.
Is that 24 hours in Wednesday? How's that even possible?
There are 24 hours in a day, yes.
Or sorry, 25.
There we go.
He had
He had
an
an
hour
extra
to
hour to Wednesday.
Yeah. Yeah, I got a question here from the Discord group.
Mm-hmm.
What's the worst crunch time experience we've had?
Well, for me, I guess, okay, shall we keep it within SkyPyre? Because I was going to go straight for university.
As was I.
I think just say whatever your thing was, because it's still valuable. And I'll lump a couple questions in here, and we'll each get a chance to take a stab at it. Worst crunch experience, and then did it pay off? If it did, was it worth it? And if it didn't, why didn't it? Because of that. It's a layered question.
Oh,
I can start.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
So let me take you back to second year, which was really third year, where we had a class about database management, and one of the final projects was to create a social media site, and we had we had several months to do this. And me and my partner on the project did not use the several months efficiently, and wound up basically cranking it out in a week. I worked mostly on the back-end part, doing the PHP scripting and the SQL statements and stuff like that, whereas he focused more on the front-end part. And my part worked very well. My back-end stuff, it did what it was asked to. It had posts. You could put pictures. They'd show up in a timeline. You could add people, block people,
Whole 9
et cetera.
yards.
Whole 9 yards. The problem was that the UI was gross. So it was a lot of crunch time for me. I spent many, many nights up until like 2 or 3 in the morning just working on all this scripting for the back end. And my part worked out pretty well. So I'd say for me, it paid off because that was for one, it was a great learning experience. I learned a lot about database management stuff and PHP, undoubtedly more than I learned in the class, honestly. But if we'd had more time to work together and sort of come up with a better design as a team instead of, hey, I'll do the back end, you do the front end, that probably would have gone better. Also, at least thank God for that class, the back end was the majority of the grading. So I'm pretty sure we got a B in that project. But that was we got a B on my achievement, not his, because I did almost all of the back end work.
You stand on my shoulders.
So I guess it was a long week of crunch for me, which was just mentally exhausting, and I guess it paid off, but I would never ever want to do that again. Definitely not by myself.
Yeah, fair enough. I think for me, I had it. Was during. I don't think it was one specific point, but I think it was just the whole of animation class. I think it was in 4th year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and basically, you guys know, but for everyone listening, is basically you had your whole semester was building up to your final animation, and first assignment 2 weeks in was, hey, come up with your story and a storyboard, I think it was, or something, and then the next one was build an animatic based on the storyboard, and it would build up like that, and then now you have your concept art, and now next deliverable is your models and textures and your rigs, and eventually you would have a final project. This was our first time doing this scale of an animation, and it was on our own. It wasn't a team project either. It was all you. So there were pros and cons. Pros was, you get to make your own story, your own animation. It's kind of cool, first time doing it. Cons, there was not nearly enough time for us to really properly do it. it was our first time doing it to this scale, to this depth, especially when it came to rigging a character. They were pretty complex rigs that was required, and we didn't know what we were doing. And for our first rigs, that was not enough time to do it properly. And if you messed up, you basically had to start over, or if you ran out of time, you just say, screw it, I'll deal with it. So that, I think just that whole semester, that whole class was just an insane period of crunch after crunch after crunch of just trying desperately to get something to work so that you don't screw yourself for the next step. So
Yeah, for me, it's my situation would also be in our animation class in university, but I'll share my specific example with that is one of failure. So I definitely failed to plan, and the expression goes, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. I did not plan enough time. I tried to, I pulled what I said is a horrible thing to do, which is, it needs to be this quality in this amount of time. Just get it done. Right? So I would. Week after week after week, I would, do 12-hour days, 12, 14-hour days. I'd go in on Saturdays, all this stuff, all because I decided I wanted to try to go above and beyond the requirements of the project, which were already very high. And to save some time on the storytelling, every step of the way was crunch because of the quantity I wanted to put out. And in the end, I wasn't satisfied whatsoever with the product I created. It was not worth it because I could have taken a step back, thought critically, and made a product I could have been proud of, and that would have got me a better grade. I got an okay grade on it, but I wasn't happy with it. It was bad, I would say, if I'm going to relate mine as an example to the AAA games industry, it's one of those games that's really bad, but everybody buys it. So you technically made your money back, but you're not proud of it, and no one likes you for it. So that was definitely my experience with crunch. It was, and again, you know what? I look at that and I say to myself, you failed the plan. You did not plan this correctly. You looked at the resources you had, you looked at the time it would take, and you said, fuck it, cram it in there. And guess what? Bad product. It's a bad animation. My mocap is janky.
but you did come out of there and you learned some.
And you know what? Maybe that's why I'm so anti-crunch.
Yeah, I think
experienced crunch for a semester straight.
I think we talk about IMD a lot, but that, like, the program that we took traumatized us so much that it made us better at not hurting ourselves as much. So it was kind of worth it in teaching us, and we knew that we could get out of it eventually. So that's kind of was the silver lining.
I think it was totally worth it. We learned a lot just in the technical sense, but also just learned a lot about ourselves and what we don't want in the future.
For me, it was for me at the end of our final project working on Halen. I just remember the last day when we did we showed it off to everyone. And I was super. I had worked myself to sickness.
You'd worked yourself into a stupor, yeah.
And we have it on in the video too. You were dead.
Yeah, and then I remember I finished that day and everyone was gonna go hang out and have fun, but I just went straight home, had my parents pick me up, and I just kind of laid in bed for 2 weeks in nearly feeling like I was dying.
And comatose.
Yeah, so
that was scary. I'm gonna fully admit I was actually really worried.
You were really sick that day.
I thought I was I nearly killed myself.
You were really bad.
Yeah, but it got done.
Yeah. And that's what the publisher's saying, but it got done.
But you know what? Here's the thing, and I wish more people shared my mentality, but you're right, it got done. But you know what? If that's the situation, the way that, like I'm very proud of what we achieved with Halen, but I'm also very disappointed in some of the things we had to do to get that game done.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mhm.
so despite you know, it got done, and you're proud of the products as given circumstances. But I personally don't believe that the circumstances are a reason to forego the situation that you came out of it, right? So
Yeah.
it's like, you know, I don't think if you came out when you came out and you were that sick or whatever, you know, and I was also like I got stress sick too later, not as bad. Um, but you know, and everybody sort of dealt with it in their own way. I know poor David Lee was
Oh, did he get sick too?
he wasn't sick, but he was just
Stress.
defeated, like mentally defeated. You know, and all this stuff. These things happen with these deadlines, and you know what? Like as the person who was managing that project within the required situation, you know what? Not worth it.
Yeah.
You know,
If
I really would, if I could go back and do it again. I'd seriously, um, I'd stow some of our expectations.
Would you cut? Would you have cut the cutscenes?
Yes. Would have absolutely cut the cutscenes.
Animated, like 2D animated comic book cutscenes.
I think
Yep.
we could have
Yeah.
gone for that. Yeah, that wasn't
I think
ideal.
that would have. I think that would have added. Now, it was a big feature for us. A big selling point is that we were doing those kind of cutscenes because no one else was doing that kind of stuff.
That's true.
Mm-hmm.
I think
No one ever does that kind of stuff. And there's
what
a
did it
reason,
cost though?
everything.
Yeah.
I think-
in the end, they didn't even put our poster on the wall.
That's right.
We had to put our poster on the wall.
I think that's a good point to end on. Is that, you know, yes, you get your project done. Yes, you know you made your money or whatever, but it is not worth your health. It is not worth your relationships. All of that. Just make sure to treat your workers fairly, treat yourself fairly, and be proud of what you come out with,
Until then, keep fit and have fun.
and feel
Well,
friggin' fantastic.
We do. Just real quick, we do have a question actually came in the chat,
Oh, we do.
Um,
Yes.
and it's from Area 257 saying, "Have you ever had?" I'm going to put this in quotation marks because I didn't know the fine distinction here. Have you ever had PTSD from deadlines? Obviously, not real PTSD. That's something that's very serious. But in the sense that, you know, her example here is that, you know, once a month, you wake up in the middle of the night, panic thinking about deadlines or assignments or things like that. You know, probably more panic than the average, you know, the average joke of like, oh, do you wake up, didn't wear your pants to your test or something like that. Probably a little more than that. And yeah, I would say that's the case. I don't think I've ever woken up in the middle of the night with one of those things, but I definitely have moments where I think about a deadline that's really not that scary, and it just triggers me. I'm like, oh God, gotta get it done.
Yeah.
Like panic. Anybody else?
I think sometimes in the evenings or something. Right now, I'll just, I don't know, just an ongoing assignment from work will just pop in my head and I'll get a moment of stress. But that's not super often, or it's not a high level of stress. But I will say for the first couple of months after graduation of university, yes, very much so. I
Yes.
always felt whenever I would be at home or wherever, you know, I'm not at school and I'm graduated, I'm just sitting there and I go, I have something due, right? Because I'm not doing anything. I'm forgetting something. What is it? What is it? What is it? And then you realize, oh wait, that's done forever. That is a weird feeling. I'm so glad I'm past that.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever had any sort of like PTSD-esque symptoms from deadlines. The worst that I've had is, you know, when I inevitably put myself through hell finishing off something at the last second, and the entire time I'm sitting there, I'm working on this thing, I'm like, why the fuck do I keep doing this? And then, you know, I finish
The
off
perils
the project.
of self-betterment.
I finish off the project, and then I just wind up doing the same thing over again because that's just how I do.
I have constant dreams of of school related, like me missing deadlines or showing up to an exam late or
Really?
never attending any of the classes, and then today's the exam day. That kind of.
Oh wow! I didn't know you had that dreams about it.
Now they've been decreasing as I got farther away from school, but they're pretty much every night during university.
Wow. Okay.
And for about a year afterwards, but it's going away slowly. But I think definitely school like has had a PTSD effect on me just due to that. And it doesn't affect my waking hours, but it definitely infiltrates my dreams.
Huh. Well, all right.
I would say more than deadlines, just a very intensive university course.
Yeah.
Applies to everybody. Engineers, architects, programmers, medical
Everyone.
people.
It doesn't affect everyone. I know some people that have like the easiest university courses ever. Like they barely even have to try.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Is it affects anybody with a hard one?
Yeah.
Anyways.
All right. Well, very good discussion on crunch. I think our opinions are very well known that we want to avoid it as all cost, and it's a bad industry standard. Unfortunately, I'm able to put those words next to each other.
A plague on both your houses.
Hey Nick, I need you to can you stay up until about 4 a.m. tonight? I need you to put together a better schedule so that we can avoid crunch. Thanks.
Yeah, you got it.
Thanks, bye.
All right. Well,
and I'm going to need you to stay up to proofread me.
God damn. No more of this. It's over. Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.